Welcome to today's The Making of a Nobody, where we peel back layers of our global venture studio and share behind the scenes. And so I'm Sejal Thacker, your host, and I'm today joining me is our chief visionary, Mark McNally. Welcome back, Mark.
Hey, Sejal.
Great to see you again.
Likewise.
Well, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about what we're doing at the studio. And as there's more interest out there, a lot of people who want to join the studio are reaching out to me and they want to learn more information. So as a sort of interest for our what we're doing and our journey continues, so does the curiosity around what we're doing, right? And so I wanted to do something a little bit different today with you. I'm going to do a little role play. So this is kind of like back to when I was doing prepping my witnesses for trials, right? So I kind of feel like I'm putting my lawyer hat on for a second, but I'm going to step into the shoes of a founder who's interested in joining the studio. And I want to find out, is the studio a right match for me, right? So I've been told by, another member of your leadership team that you're looking into creating a new called Civility Works, right? And what I've heard about it is that it's going to revolutionize workplace cultures. So I'm intrigued by this new code that you're looking to build. And I would like to talk to you a little bit about, whether I'm a good fit for the team or not. So you ready for the challenge?
I'm ready.
Perfect. So can you tell me a little bit more about, I'm intrigued by what your process is about. How are you going to recruit founders to lead these companies? What does that process look like? And what are some of the qualities you look for in the founders?
Yeah. Great question. I think the way you set it up, though, is really important. We as a studio have theses, right? We have certain industries we care about. We have certain things we think are a good fit for us in terms of the companies we want to create. And I want to be going into the world with at least an intention, right? We intend to create this kind of company so that when we find founders, we're having conversations that are, based on, conviction and, belief and things we're willing to invest in. And we can also figure out the same thing when we're talking to potential, co-founders, right? We can identify if we have resonance, if we have the same purpose, the right why, right? I think that's really important. It might sound nuanced, but we are not a passive investor. We're not looking for people to pitch us ideas and we say, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Let's write a check for that. That's not what we do, right? We actually are founders. We decide to build a company we think needs to exist in the planet. We decide to write checks, but bigger than the checks, we put all of our time and resources into making sure those companies succeed. So when we talk to a founder, we're talking to them as a founder. We're like, is this the right person to join my team? Because I'm trying to create this thing, right? It's a really important nuanced difference. I mean, you'll see a lot of venture studios will say, we're trying to create this thing and we're recruiting people who have this background. And they're actually trying to recruit founders to go run with an idea. We don't think that way. We think of ourselves as founders. Like we are in the trenches. If we decide to build it, it's coming out of our pockets. And we expect to make it successful in the first 6 to 12 months personally as a studio. So when we're recruiting co-founders to run with it longer term, we're asking ourselves, are these the right people, right? So it does change the conversation in that we're not looking for pitches. We're actually almost interviewing, if that makes any sense.
No, that really makes sense. And actually, I think that's such a nuanced distinction, right? And that definitely is I love where you started with that too, because Civility Works resonated with the kind of work that I do, right? For my own business. And so that's the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you. So, I've been sort of thinking about a tool for my own business about how to help organizations measure civility in their organizations, right? And so if I've got some of my own ideas and you have an idea that you've already got thinking, how do we sort of blend those together? Or is there a blending? What say do I have in this process?
Oh, yeah, no, of course. I mean, great question. I mean, when I say we have an intention, it doesn't mean we have it all figured out, right? Mm-hmm. Think about just pure. If you're recruiting a partner to help you build something that's irrational and has never been done before. You're trying to recruit a partner because you're trying to make sure they stretch your thinking, right? They bring something to the table that you don't. They see something that maybe you don't, right? That's what I would recommend any founder do if you're trying to recruit a team around you, right? So we're no different. If we say we care about this space and we have a hypothesis and we're going in a direction, we're still looking for good people that are bigger and better and smarter than us or bring different ideas, right? So you've heard me say that idea of like mini acquisitions. Sometimes we'll come across people who have a small startup. It's going in a certain direction. Maybe they've put in some personal capital, some friends and family. Maybe they put in some credit card debt, whatever. They've created an MVP in a certain direction, right? We're probably not doubling down on that necessarily, but if we think that fits a part of what we're trying to create, then we're having that conversation with the founder, right? We're saying, we like where you're going. However, what if we did this plus that? This is our vision. Does that resonate or not, right? And that's just an open, transparent conversation, right? There's no right answers. That person can go on and build that company into a, wild success. Or maybe our idea makes some sense. Or maybe that interaction gets to a better idea, right? And I think that's been the truth with a lot of the companies that we have brought in, as we call mini acquisitions, where we've had really smart, great human beings bringing an idea or connecting with an idea we had, but together we ended up in a better spot. And we were all excited about that path, right? And then you can figure out the economics, you can figure out the, contracts.
Yeah. So I love that. Thank you so much for those insights. Can you share an example of one of those mini acquisitions and sort of how, kind of walk us through that process? I think it's helpful.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I'm not sure if these guys will want all these pings, but William and Nick from Evalify are two of my favorite human beings. Very, very smart individuals. We collectively as a studio have been thinking about intellectual property should and could inform the companies we create, right? As a concept, we were like bought into that. One of the founders of Adjacent Possible was named back then, reached out to us, and they saw me on a podcast, and they said, "Hey, you want to do 1,000 or 100 companies in 5 years? What if you could do 10,000 companies in 5 years?" And I was like, "All right, I'm a sucker. I'll take the phone call." So I talked to the guys, and I just really enjoyed who they were as humans. I enjoyed the way they thought. They definitely knew a lot about IP. They came from big corporate backgrounds. They knew intellectual property intimately. I would say maybe the original idea was not something that I could get really behind, but it was all really rational, right? And the only thing I'd say about the studio is we do care about building companies that can get fast traction, right? And their idea was very broad in terms of like an enterprise level kind of software platform. Nothing wrong with that, except it didn't fit our investment profile. And so we started saying, well, we like you guys. We believe IP is going to inform what we do for a living. Let's brainstorm. Where could this go? And it turned into a really great validation exercise of liking those people, us ourselves teasing out our ideas. And we landed onto Evalify, which was, how do you upload a pitch deck and get instant understanding and score of whether or not a business is viable or not, or has conflicts in the IP space. So we really liked that because it became laser focused. You could be digital acquisition. You could hyper growth it. You could get to 100,000 MRR. You could get to metrics that mattered, but it was also something we could build within, let's say, 12 months. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to do other things in IP, and we're going to do other things in IP with these guys exactly. But our first product was something that was definable. Make sense?
Totally. Thank you for sharing that. And so I think you were starting to go there, but I want to move to a topic that's on top of mind for many founders, right, that are looking to join Nobody Studios. What is that typical, like, what is the equity exchange that occurs? What does that kind of look at? And how is that equity percentage determined? Can you walk us a little bit through that?
Yeah. So we're transparent in that we create companies, meaning that we're founders. And when you're a founder, you own usually 100% of the company, right? So our goal is to go from whiteboard, we call 0, to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Our job is to go from a whiteboard into a company in the market that's actually working. To go from 0 to 1, we expect we're going to recruit really awesome co-founders, right? So depending on what people bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
we're expecting anywhere from 25 to 40% of the equity to go to co-founders, right? And for a lot of people, that's weird. That seems lopsided. But we consider ourselves founders, right? We're not just investing in things; we're actually building things. So most of these ideas we came up with ourselves. So again, there's a ratio that can change if someone brings something really special to the table. They bring intellectual property or patents to the table. If they bring revenue, they bring customers to the table. That ratio can change. But the reason why controlling interest matters to us is we actually believe that what makes venture studios work is in the very early stage, you have to be able to pause companies. You have to be able to kill companies. You have to be able to merge them. You have to be able to split them into multiple companies. You have to be able to do these things as an owner that venture capitalists can't do because they're passive investors and they own a minority stake, right? But we have really great, healthy conversations with awesome founders that bring a lot to the table, and we can get really creative. Why does that make sense? Because when you join the studio, you also get a piece of everything we ever create. So when people join the studio, they're not just a new co-founder or co-founder. They are a nobody, Sejal, we call people nobodies. They are nobody. They actually have equity in everything we ever create. So their new co, we hope, succeeds. Maybe their third idea, their 15th idea might work. But if Nuco 42 succeeds and has an exit, they're going to see a payday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're part of something bigger. And I really do believe it's a really hard thing to quantify about what makes us special. But I've been doing startups for a long time. And as somebody with experience who grows up and has mortgages and has kids in school and stuff like that, I think it's harder and harder to make a bet on working out of your garage and eating ramen, right? You have responsibilities, you have bills, I think there's people who want to be in the startup game who are looking for the ability to be part of something bigger than themselves and bigger than their idea, because their idea might not work. And the stats will tell you that a lot of startups don't, right? But if you're part of a machine that builds startups, and if you're part of a family that thinks the same way, meaning you can always have multiple bites of the apple, and you're going to see upside on deals that you're maybe not involved in at all, right? I think it changes the calculus for some really very talented people to get involved in this startup game with us. And again, I don't think we have to be the right answer for everybody, but I've seen us be very successful in a lot of conversations with fantastic people. So I'm comfortable that we'll attract the right people to the journey.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because one of the things as a founder that I have, have struggled with myself is, do I want to give up control, right? So if I join Nobody Studios, do I have to give up control of what I'm already working on or the ideas I might have? And so I love the way that you put it and explained it, is that it's not going to be the right fit for everybody, but you've outlined what the benefits and the advantages are. I mean, the way I look at it, I think very logically, it's just diversifying the risk, right?
Yeah.
Of, instead of putting all my eggs in one basket, now I get to put it in 100 baskets at Nobody Studios.
But let me take what you just said in a different current conversation we're having. Really amazing founders, people I really like as humans, and they have the right background, and they keep bringing this up. I don't want to give up control. And I've actually said, I don't need your current company, right? keep your current company as it is. Keep your own control. What we're trying to do is figure out how to take what you've done well with, say, 5 or 6 deployments, and we're trying to figure out how to do 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we do a deal around that expansion? And you guys be advisors, but keep control of what you think is working right now, right? I'm a big fan of the idea that there's lots of right answers. So I want to be constantly curious. I want to be figuring out where the friction is. I want to be talking through how we could craft something that could work, right? And at the end of the day, if it's not fit, it's not fit. But what are we really trying to do? We're not trying to take over something. We're actually just trying to get those humans that are brilliant into a journey that we can create something new, their experience, their knowledge, their passion. But control is probably the wrong conversation if that's what we're focusing on, right? Our model works a certain way, and we're very, upfront about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not negotiable because that's how our model works, but it's not meant to be take over. It's just meant to be, let's build something special together. Right?
Yeah. It's that collaborative co-founder type of mentality. It's not that we're calling the shots, but so let's get very clear with everybody, or if you can explain to me, what are some of the support and resources that I'm going to get if I come into Venture Studio with you?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, every Venture Studio is different, but what we have strived to do is build a world-class marketing team, a world-class finance team, a world-class technology team, a world-class operations team, biz dev. So everything that you would have to figure out as a young company, you're not doing at least by yourself, right? We think as founders. So where do you need to be in terms of technology? What is the right team to hire? Who's going to build something? Like, we're solving that. We're not asking you the question. I mean, obviously you're part of it, but again, we think of ourselves as founders. We are trying to build this together. So all those things that we're trying to build, and every studio is different. We have invested a lot into our core team, and it's a world-class team that would be, hard for any studio to compare to, but it'd be hard for any, early stage startup to compare to, right?
Yeah, I love that. And it is, I love the word team, because that's what it is when you come in, you're part of a team. You're not doing this by yourself, which is really kind of where founders struggle the most, is that you feel alone. Like, there's no one else to kind of do this with. And we're really kind of building that team together. And so, scalability is another thing, right? That for founders, we're looking at, that's a critical factor for any startup, is are we going to be scalable or not? And so I know that Nobody Studios, has a progressive model, right? Or what I call progressive, in that you're estimating an allocation of $250,000 per startup, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, right? For starting a company or building the company. So what does that $250,000 go towards? And how do I know when I can get when I can get that money, and so that I can continue to build together? Right. So if you can answer a little bit more on that topic.
Yeah. So our model is called progressive, which is a meld of frugal and aggressive. But it's very contrarian to the current market. We're not trying to tell founders, here's your 5 million, go build the best company you can. We are actually very focused on time-based constraints and capital constraints. We believe this crazy idea that when you max out your credit cards and you borrow money from grandma, you're laser focused on building a very special company, right? Because you have to create revenue. And so the way we think of progressive is not anybody's going on full-time salaries and trying to figure out what they're going to build in the future. Progressive is very much focused on making small bets towards things that are going to add value to that company. So it's all product focused, building a product, or it's marketing focused, build a marketing machine that is repeatable and demonstrable in terms of results, right? Our main goal as a studio is to create companies that are fundable. So call that like a seed stage or pre-seed stage. Meaning we can look at other investors in the eye and say, this company is real. Mm-hmm. This company works. So that 250 is cash. We're probably putting another $1.5 million into our in-kind services, right? So the studio's marketing people, technology people, my time, your time, like we're all in on building that company. So you'll come across a Nobody Studios early stage company that is maybe a year old, but it's going to feel like a company that's 3 years old. The sophistication, the results, the metrics, the data room, everything is going to look like a much more mature company because that's what we do for a living, right? So yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, but so I know we've talked about the progressive model. You've talked about this on prior live streams, right? But what is each newco expected to do funding rounds of their own? So can you again share an example? And I know Evalify is one I've been seeing a lot of information being shared on LinkedIn about. So maybe you could talk to us about what you're doing with Evalify.
Yeah, I mean, for folks that are deeper into the studio, we have this concept called machine of machines. So everything that we know that we have to do in terms of making the studio succeed, if we see it repetitively as a challenge, we ask ourselves, can this be its own freestanding company, right? So a good example is we have a placeholder, our working title called Funco. But we say, hey, making sure these companies get funded when they leave the nest is an important process we have to get right. And 27 years into startups, I can tell you funding is hard and there's got to be a better way. So we're very curious about how to reinvent the funding process. So we're using Evalify as actually a proxy customer to force how do we think about raising capital at scale. That means relationships. That means broadcast networks. That means positioning. That means terms. That means legal. That means lots of things. So we're using it as a chance to think through 100 companies in 5 years means you're probably funding a company every 3 or 4 weeks, right? So we're keenly aware of that goal, which means we have to build the systems and the muscle and the company around how to make this thing scalable. Evalify is a great example, a great team, early traction, a lot of exciting things. It's demonstrable. Investors respond positively to it. But still understanding how to broadcast that and get it to checks written is something that we're learning as an organization. And you heard me say this for 4 years. We're only going to be learning. We're going to mess up a lot of stuff. All I care about is learning and moving forward. And so, Evalify is in this phase now where we've got really great investors coming to the table, and they're going to skyrocket their scale and the results, and they'll probably get even a priced pre-seed or seed round done by the end of the year. There's a lot of great things there, but it's only because we've embraced it and tried to learn from it.
Absolutely. So Mark, what does an ideal exit look like for Nobody Studios? How do we get the startups ready for this transition?
It's hard for me to say what an ideal exit looks like. I would just say that, reiterate for folks that have watched our story for a while, we care about optimizing for a mid-stage exit, meaning we don't overcapitalize our companies. We are contrarian in the market right now. We think people are overfunding companies. So if you raise $20 million on a $80 million pre-money valuation, your company is now worth $100 million. Everybody on that board wants a 10x return. So they want $1 billion exit. 80% of exits happen under $300 million. So we walk into it really wide-eyed and say, if we overcapitalize, we could price ourselves out of the most likely exits. Meaning we care about building companies with good metrics and good revenue and great teams, but we overvalue being lean, and we overvalue not raising too much because we want all the options to be available to us, right? Now, if we just see a company going to the moon and we're 100% sure it can go to $1 billion in revenue. Look, we'll triple down, quadruple down. We'll scale that company. But our model is not predicated on unicorn or bust, which is where the entire venture community is right now. Everything has to be a unicorn or it's not going to succeed. We don't believe in that.
Yeah. And I remember the first time you said that, I remember this was when we were really kind of in our equity crowdfunding campaign. And that was on one of the slides on our pitch decks. Even before that, I'd seen that. And we've stood our ground on that. And now I think other people are also starting to see it in the same way. I'm seeing more and more articles online about this topic. And I'm like, yeah, this is something that's been kind of built into what we've been doing for a while now. Yeah.
Correct. We were contrarian. And I wrote that slide 4.5 years ago when there was like 40 unicorns in the market. Today there's like 1,500 unicorns in the market. And 80% of them are raising money at a lower valuation and they're laying off employees. And, we said this is not going to end well for people. When it ends up well, it's great. It's fantastic. But it's just the odds are very, very low.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark. This has been an eye-opening conversation for me. As usual, I always learn so much from you. But today, this one, I really kind of look at our model and what we're trying to accomplish in sort of from a different perspective. It's very nuanced. But really sort of helps me when I'm out there talking about what we're doing to other people as well, because lots of people are reaching out. So everybody, thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in learning more about what we're doing, check us out on our website. Mark and I do these live streams almost every Friday. They're all on our YouTube channel, so you can learn more about it. And don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you for joining. And thank you again, Mark, for sharing your wisdom. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Angel.
Bye, everyone.